welcome everyone. This is Nichel Anderson. I'm your host for my podcast show that I will be broadcasting on both of my shows, okay? So let's go ahead and get into this. I'm going to go ahead and say my prayer right quick before we get that. So in this day, I'm thankful to God that I give ultimate praise and gratitude for this blessing in my podcast show, the opportunity to share for others of the collective that can as well move them forward on their journey and learn from what my platform aims to provide, so that I will use it for the greater good in the name of Jesus. Amen and hallelujah. All right, so this right here is, I don't know where to begin with this, y'all. I love this book. When I first decided to read it, as I got the opportunity to be a columnist at a online magazine then for the Harlem Renaissance, I was able to really look at this time period and just read all of this wonderful work during that time. And I came across this book, Miss Hurston, and when I read it the first time, I swear I could not put it down. I couldn't wait. I wanted to kind of get comfortable with my tea, which I have tea, you know what I'm saying, right here now, and just didn't be bothered. I just swept away in the story. I mean, the storytelling is just profound. And we're going to get really into it. Since I just adore this book, I'm going to be breaking it up in so many parts, right? And I definitely want to read the foreword. It's very important. It talks about, to me, some of the politics of why she didn't, during her time, got the accolades that she deserved. Yes, it's so beautiful. It's just amazing. And then at the end, it's an afterthought, and that's from Alan Gates, and he usually get these big opportunities anyway, so he's at the back. I might read some of it on his, but for the foreword, I just felt like he got so many goodies in it. I just don't want to read parts of it and leave that there. This is a time to show what I know. So here we are. Let's go ahead and get started. And so we're going to do this. I just love this book. Oh my gosh, it's just a masterpiece. So before we get started, I want to talk about the foreword. It was written by Mary Helen Washington. And before I get into the story, we're going to take the time to read it, because when I went through it, again, like I said, when I first read, I couldn't put it down. I mean, oh my gosh, I was telling everybody about it. We're going to start with the foreword because it's a lot of information in it. It talks about her journey, talks about those that was a pioneer and petitioned here and there to make sure her work was known and remembered. And now her book is being taught in some universities, just as they still trying to learn the expression that she picked. So let's go ahead and get started with this. So here it is, the foreword. So let's go. Their Eyes Were Watching God by Zora Neale Hurston. So this foreword, it says, in 1987, the 50th anniversary of the first publication of Their Eyes Were Watching God, the University of Illinois Press inserted a banner in the lower right-hand corner of the cover of the anniversary reprint edition, 1987 50th anniversary, still a bestseller. The back cover, using a quote from the Saturday Review from Doris Grombat, proclaimed Their Eyes the finest black novel of its time and one of the finest of all time. So Zora Neale Hurston would have been shocked and pleased, I believe, at this stunning reversal in the reception of her second novel, which for nearly 30 years after its first publication was out of print, largely unknown and unread, and dismissed by the male literacy establishment in subtle and not subtle ways. One white reviewer in 1937 praised the novel in the Saturday Review as a rich, racy love story, if somewhat awkward, but had difficulty believing that such a town as Eatonville, inhabited and governed entirely by Negroes, could be real. Black male critics was much harsher in their assessments of the novel. From the beginning of her career, Hurston was severely criticized for not writing fiction in the protest tradition. Sterling Brown said in 1936 of her earlier book, Muse and Man, that it was not bitter enough that it did not depict the harsher side of black life in the South. That Hurston made black Southern life appear easygoing and carefree. Alan Locke, Dean of Black Scholars and Critics during the Harlem Renaissance, wrote in his yearly review of the literature for Opportunity. If you listened to my podcast yesterday, y'all, I talked about that, the history of, to kind of get you all framework to what I'm talking about now in this wonderful book. All right, so back to this. So in the Opportunity magazine, that Hurston, their eyes were simply out of step with the more serious trends of the times. When he asked, will Hurston stop creating these pseudo-primiters whom the reading public still loves to laugh with, weep over in envy, and come to grips with the motion friction and social document fiction. The most damaging critique of all came from the most well-known and influential black writer of the day, and that was Richard Wright. Writing for the leftist magazine New Masses, Wright wrote that Their Eyes is a novel that did for literature what the minstrel shows did for theater. That is, make white folks laugh. The novel, he said, carries no theme, no message, no thought, but exploited those quaint aspects of Negro life that satisfy the taste of a right audience. I'm sorry, I just can't keep reading that right there. I'm gonna come in. I totally disagree. Because when you look back in the history, and I do recommend it to check out my episode prior, you had W.D. Boys and Alan Locke. I go through the history of the Harlem Renaissance into now and how it's connected to the DTC movement, as it was a movement back then. And so W.D. Boys is known for his intellectual ability to frame things that need to be addressed because he was a socialist, right? Then you have Alan Locke that also understood the expression of that, and that could be in poetry, that can be in essay, that can be in this novel that Miss Hurston did a wonderful job. So to not credit her that and focus on what it needs to be, really in the sense of that W.D. Boys already had the platform for a more political to talk. And don't get me wrong, you had to. This is what, 1920s going to 1930s at that point. But at the same time, there was this is the other bend where you have Alan Lockley connecting with that and hone on that and supported it. So you had both. It's just this particular novel, or it was probably some few other ones, but mainly this because she was so, in a sense, popular in that sense. Focus on things that not so straight in your face. We didn't make this change, which, don't get me wrong, it need to, but at the same time, not to take away that since she didn't include it, that it's just frivolous and it's nothing that what it should be. And to this day, it's like she's getting her blessings that she didn't get when she was here. And I just thought where he's going is like looking at the side, where he's like, you need to write a certain way in order to be, but okay, let's put that to the side. Let's say that don't really matter. Is the work extraordinary? Waiting for it. I need to hear it to say, yes, it is. To me, that was taken from her. And I believe it was some hesitation because her writing is profound. To me, she was ahead of her time. And we're going to get into it when we get into the stories, but that's what I pick up, and I think that created the fear that maybe Mr. Wright, let's just keep it what I'm used to, doing something else. You feel where I'm going? You're doing something outside the block. I can't really accept that. And so even if you have disagreed, I just don't like, when I see the rest of this, I don't like even want to repeat it. I'm just particular, and I really love her work, and it's just unnecessary. It seemed like she was being honed on that you got to be the voice, or you got to be, no one was going to be a soldier. I don't feel and read where Dr. Du Bois was saying that. He just disagreed with you, and kept it moving, but not to take away or make it seem the writing, if it not a certain theme, it shouldn't be justified and held an account. It's almost like taken away where she should receive all the rewards. I mean, this book that I'm about to read is just profound. That's how you do it. That's how you do it. The writing, the scenes, the colorfulness of the writing, I mean, you from one page to the next. I never forget it when that's the wonderful thing when you read a book, when it's the first expression. So I'm going to just leave what he was saying, and we're going to move on to the rest of this foreword. And again, I want to read it because it talks about the history. It talks about how other people viewed it. It talks about how it took off. I mean, this book in itself is a movie. And I want to be able to share and be a part of those that want to revive what she did and give her the credit and the acknowledgement. But yeah, I think it was this fear because she was so good. They read that and they couldn't handle it. I'm just going to put it like that. That's all what that was at the end of the day. So let me continue, because Miss Washington did a wonderful job in this foreword. So the next part of the paragraph, it says, like most of my friends and colleagues who were teaching in the newly formed Black Studies departments in the late 60s, I can still recall quite vividly my own discovery of Their Eyes somewhere around 1968 in one of my many thriving Black bookstores in the country. This one, Vaughn's Bookstore, was in Detroit. I came across the slender little paperback, bought it for 75 cents, with a stylish portrait of Jane Crawford and Jody Starks on the cover, she pumping water at the well, her long hair cascading down her back, and her head turned just slightly in its direction, with a look of longing and expectancy. He standing at the distance in his fancy silk shirt and purple spenders, his coat over one arm, his head cocked to one side, with the look that speaks to Janie of far horizons. What I love immediately about this novel, besides his high poetry, yes, she has a wonderful job with that, and his female hero, was its investment in black folk traditions. So here finally was a woman on a quest for her own identity, and unlike so many other questing figures in black literature, her journey would take her not away from, but deeper and deeper into blackness, the descent into the Everglades with its rich black soil, wild cane, and communal life, representing immersion into black tradition. But for most black women readers discovering their eyes, I gotta put the title, I don't know why it seemed like they didn't want to. I just read it like some other place someone was just saying the part of the title. I want to read the whole title because I love it. Their eyes were watching God. For the first time, what was most compelling was the figure of Janie Crawford, a powerful, articulate, self-reliant, and radically different from any woman character they had ever before encountered in literature. So it was Andrea Washing, then an instructor in the Afro-American Studies Department at Harvard, remembers reading Their Eyes Were Watching God in a women's study group with Nellie McKay, Barbara Smith, and Miss Pepperton. I love the language of this book, Washing says, too. But mostly I loved it because it was about a woman who wasn't pathetic. Wasn't a tragic mulatto who defiled everything that was expected of her, who went off with a man without bothering to divorce the one she loved, and wasn't broken, crushed, and run down. The reaction of women all across the country who found themselves so powerfully represented in a literature text was often direct and personal. Janie and TK, these are the characters of the book, were talked about as though they were people the readers knew immediately. Shirley Ann Williams remembers going down to conference in Los California in 1969, where the main speaker, Tony Cade Bambara, asked women in the audience, "Are the sisters here ready for tea cake?" And Williams, remembering that even tea cake had his flaws, responded, "Are the tea cakes of the world ready for us?" Williams taught Their Eyes Were Watching God for the first time at Cali State Fresno in a migrant farming area where the students, like the characters in Their Eyes Were Watching God, was used to making their living from the land. For the first time, Williams said, they saw themselves in characters, and they saw their lives portrayed with joy. So Washington's comment on the female as a hero and Williams' story about the joyful portrayal of a culture together emblematize what critics would later see as the novel's unique contribution to black literature. It affirms black cultural traditions while revising them to empower black women. By 1971, Their Eyes Were Watching God was an underground phenomenon, surfacing here and there wherever there was a growing interest in African American studies and a black woman literature teacher. Alice Walker was teaching the novel at Wellesley in 1971 to 1972 school year when she discovered that Hurston was only a footnote in the scholarship, reading an essay by a white folklorist that Hurston was, and Walker decided such a fate was an insult to Hurston and began her search. Personal essay in search of Zora Neale Hurston, a marker inscribed her name. That she was a genius of the South, she was a novelist, a folklorist, anthropologist. With that inscription and that essay, Walker ushered in a new era in the scholarship on Their Eyes Were Watching God. By 1975, Their Eyes, again out of print, was in submission, was circulated at the December 1975 convention of the MOLIAE Language Association to get the novel back into print. In that same year, at a conference on minority literature held at Yale and directed by Michael Cook, the few copies of Their Eyes, They're Watching God that were available were circulated for 2 hours at a time to conference, many of whom were reading the novel for the first time. In March of 1977, when the MLA, that's the Modern Language Association, Commission on Minority Groups in the Study of Language and Literature, published its first list of out-of-print books, most in demand at a national level. The program coordinator, Dexter Fisher, wrote, Their Eyes Were Watching God is unanimously at the top of the list. Between 1977 and 1974, Zora Neale Hurston Renaissance was in full bloom. Come on. Robert Hemingway biography, Zora Neale Hurston, a literary biography published in 1977, was a runaway bestseller at the December 1977 MLA convention, and that's still the Modern Language Association. And the New University of Illinois Press edition of Their Eyes Were Watching God, published a year after the Hemingway biography in March of 1978, made the novel available on a steady and dependable basis for the next 10 years. I love myself when I am laughing, and then again when I am looking mean and impressive. A Zora Neale Hurston reader edited by Alice Walker was published by the Feminist Press in 1979. Probably more than anything else, these three literature events made it possible for Sears Hurston scholarship to emerge. But the event that, for me, truly marked the beginning of the third wave of critical attention to Their Eyes Were Watching God took place in December 1979 at the MLA convention in San Francisco in a session aptly titled Traditions and the Transformations in Afro-American Letters, chaired by Robert Steptoe of Yale and John Callahan of Lewis and Clark College, and myself, then at the University of Detroit, as the two panelists. Despite the fact that the session was scheduled on Sunday morning, the last session of the entire convention, the room was packed and the audience unusually attentive. In his comments at the end of the session, Steptoe raised the issue that has become one of the most highly controversial and hotly contested aspects of the novel: whether or not Janie, that's one of the characters of the book, is able to achieve her voice in Their Eyes Were Watching God. What concerned Steptoe was the courtroom scene in which Janie is called on not only to preserve her own life and liberty, also to make the jury, as well as all of us who hear her tale, understand the meaning of her life with TK. Steptoe found Janie curiously silent in this scene, with Hurston telling the story in third person so that we do not hear Janie speak, at least not in her own first-person voice. Steptoe was quite convinced and unconvincing that the framed story in which Janie spoke to Phoebe creates only the illusion that Janie has found her voice, that Hurston's insistence on telling Janie's story in the third person undercuts her power as speaker. Okay, so while the rest of us in the room struggled to find our voices, Alice Walker rose and claimed hers, insisting passionately that women did not have to speak when men thought they should, that they would choose when and where they wished to speak, because while many women had found their own voice, they also knew when it was better not to use it. I totally agree with that. I was like, yes, she's telling it. All right, what was most remarkable about the energetic and at times heated discussion that followed Steptoe and Walker's remarks was the assumption of everyone in that room that Their Eyes Were Watching God, the book, was a shared test that a novel that just 10 years earlier was unknown and unavailable had entered into critical acceptance as perhaps the most widely known and the most privileged text in the African American literary canon. Come on, she deserved all that. Oh, Miss Hurston, you was amazing. All right, so let me continue. The MLA session was important for another reason. Walker's defense of Janie's choice, actually Hurston's choice to be silent in the crucial places in the novel, turned out to be the earliest feminist reading of Voice in Their Eyes, a reading that was later supported by many other Hurston scholars. In a recent essay on Their Eyes Were Watching God and the Question of Voice, Michael Awkward argues that Janie's voice at the end of the novel is a communal one, that when she tells Phoebe to tell her story, you can't tell him what I'll say if you want to. That's just the same as me, 'cause my tongue is my friend's mouth. She is choosing a collective rather than an individual voice, demonstrating her closeness to the collective spirit of the African American oral tradition. That Davis agrees with this reading of Voice and added that while Janie, the character of the book, is the teller of the tale, Phoebe is the bearer of the tale. Phoebe is the bearer of the tale. Davis says that Janie's experimental life may not allow her to effective changes beyond what she causes in Phoebe's life, but Phoebe, standing within the traditional role of women, is the one most suited to take the message back to the community. Although, like Steptoe, I too am uncomfortable with the absence of Janie's voice in the courtroom scene. I think silence reflects Hurston's discomfort with the model of the male hero who asserts himself through his powerful voice, where Hurston chose a female hero for the story. She faced an interesting dilemma. The female presence was inherently a critique of the male-dominant folk culture and therefore could not be its heroic representative. When Janie says at the end of her story that talking don't amount to much if it is divorced from experience, she is testifying to the limitation of voice in critiquing the culture that celebrates orality to the exclusion of the inner growth. Her final speech to Phoebe at the end of Their Eyes Were Watching God actually casts doubt on the relevance of oral speech and supports Alice Walker's claim that women's silence can be intentional and useful. So here's like a paragraph of it, and let's see, I think that's part of the story, which I get into that. Let's move to the next paragraph of what Miss Washington is saying in this foreword of the book. The language of the man in their eyes is almost always divorced from any kind of interrogatory, and the men are rarely shown in the process of growth. The talking is either a game or a method of exerting power. Janie's life is about the experience of relationships, and while Jody and Tea Cake and all the other talking men are essentially static characters, Janie and Phoebe pay closer attention to their own inner life to experience because it is the site for growth. If there is anything outpouring of scholarship on Their Eyes Were Watching God teaches us, is that this is a rich, complicated text, and that each generation of readers will bring something new to our understanding of it. If we were protective of this text and unwilling to subject it to literary analysis during the first years of its rebirth, that was because it was a beloved text for those of us who discovered in it something of our own. I can agree with that. I really connected to her story myself. All right, let's continue. Our own language, our own history. In 1989, I found myself asking new questions about Their Eyes Were Watching God, questions about Hurston's ambivalence toward her female protagonist, about its uncritical depiction of violence towards women, about the ways in which Janie's voice is dominated by men, even in passages that are about her own inner growth. In Their Eyes, Hurston was not giving us an ambiguous, heroic female character. She puts Janie on the track of autonomy, self-realization, and independence, but she also placed Janie in the position of romantic heroine as the object of Tea Cake's quest. At times so subordinate to the magnificent presence of Tea Cake that even her entire life reveals more about him than about her. What Their Eyes Were Watching God shows us is a woman writer struggling with the problems of the questing hero as a woman and the difficulties in 1937 of giving a woman character such power and such daring. Because Their Eyes Were Watching God has been in print continuously since 1978, it has become available each year to thousands of new readers. It is taught in colleges all over the country, and its availability and popularity have generated 2 decades of the highest level of scholarship. But I want to remember the history that nurtured this text into rebirth, especially the collective spirit of the 60s and the 70s that galvanized us into political action to retrieve the lost works of Black women writers. There is a lovely symmetry between text and context in the case of Their Eyes, as Their Eyes affirms and celebrate Black culture. It reflects the same affirmation of Black culture that rekindled interest in the text. Janie telling her story to a listening woman friend, Phoebe, suggests to me all those women readers who discovered their own tale in Janie's story and passed it on from one to another, and certainly as the novel represents a woman redefining and revising a male-dominant canon. These readers have, like Janie, made their voices heard in the world of letters, revising the canon while asserting their proper place in it. And that was by Mary Helen Washington. Beautiful said at the end. I can relate to all of that, okay? Finding my voice, understanding about the journey and choices. So when I first read the foreword, like I got to read this during my opening because it's very well done. The history that she placed it in there and the conclusion and how women, particular Black women, can connect to it and come together and unite in the sense of sharing the experience, their own experience. And she said that so well. All right, so that's that part. I'm going to leave because I want to kind of dig more into that too, especially about some of the pushback that she got in 1937 and why. It's like the book itself kind of predicted that it will be rejected by most of a certain group of critics that are not going to see what the whole purpose were, what's the vision, what's the message, and that's exactly what happened. So look at that. I mean, where one person, you have Mr. Wright, what have you, that was his most very famous, influential, and he had that time, of being influential and people gravitated to that. But she got the world because look how it got reprinted by the 70s and people are finding it and still loving it. So it's like she got the last laugh. I mean, it is what it is. I mean, when you think about it, look at that. I just feel like she was ahead of her time. So we're going to go ahead and start. This is going to be part 1. And let's get started of reading the actual book. Their Eyes Were Watching God by Zora Neale Hurston. She is one of the, to me, I'm going to say it, infamous contributor to the Harlem Renaissance that produces so much talent. So we're going to go with it. Let's get started. Chapter 1. Their Eyes Were Watching God by Zora Neale Hurston. Ships at a distance have every man's wish on board. For some, they come in with the tide. For others, they sail forever on the horizon, never out of sight, never landed until the watcher turns his eyes away in resignation. His dreams mocked, death by time. That is the life of man. Now women forget all those things they don't want to remember, and remember everything they don't want to forget. The dream is the truth. Then they act and do things accordingly. So the beginning of this was a woman, and she had come back from burying the sick or the ailing with friends at the pillow and the feet. She had come back from the sodden and the bloating, and their eyes flung wide open in judgment. The people all saw her come because it was sundown. The sun was gone, but he had left his footprints in the sky. It was a time for sitting on porches beside the road. It was a time to hear things and talk. These sitters had been tongueless, earless, eyeless. Conveyances all day long, the mules and other brutes had occupied the skins. By now, the son and the boss man were gone, so the skins felt powerful and human. They became lords of silence and lesser things. They passed nations through their mouths. They sat in judgment, seeing the woman as she was made. Then remember the envy they had stored up from their other times. So they chewed up the back parts of their minds and swallowed with relish. They made burning statements with questions and twos out of laughs. It was mass cruelty. The mood come alive, words walking without masters, walking all together like harmony in a song. What's she doing coming back here in them overalls? Can't she find no dress to put on? What's that blue satin dress she left here in? Where all that money her husband took and now no more left her? What that old 40-year-old woman doing with her hair swinging down her back like some young girl? Where she left that young lad of a boy she went off here with? Thought she was going to marry. Where he left her? What he done with all her money? Bet he off with some girl so young she ain't even got no hairs. Why she don't stay in her class? When she got to where they were, she turned her face on the bandalog and spoke. They scrambled a nosy, Good evening. And they left, their mouths sitting open and their ears full of hope. Her speech was pleasant enough, but she kept walking, straight on to her gate. The porch couldn't talk for looking. The man noticed her firm buttocks like she had grapefruits in her hip pockets. The great rope of black hair swinging to her waist and unraveling in the wind like a plum. Then her pugnacious, trying to bore more holes in her shirt. The man was saving with the mind what they lost with the eye. The woman took the faded shirt and muttered overalls and laid them away for remembrance. It was a weapon against her strength, and if it turned out of no significance, still it was a hope that she might fall to their level someday. But nobody moved. Nobody spoke. Nobody even thought to swallow spit until after her gate slammed behind her. Pearl Stone opened her mouth and laughed real hard because she didn't know what else to do. She fell all over Miss Sumpkins while she laughed. Miss Sumpkins snorted violently and sucked her teeth. Y'all let her worry y'all. You ain't like me. Ain't got her to study, but if she ain't got manners enough to stop and let folks know how she been making out, let her go on then. She ain't even worth talking after. Lulu Moss drawled through her nose. She sits high, but she looks low. That's what I'll say. But those the old woman wanting for young boys. Phoebe Watson hitched her rocking chair forward before she spoke. Well, nobody don't know if it's anything to tell or not. Me ain't her best friend all don't know. Maybe us don't know into things like you do, but we all know how she went way from here, and us sure seen her come back. Tain't no use in your trying to cloak no old woman like Janie Starks. Phoebe friend or no friend. Ain't that she ain't so old as some of y'all that talking? She's way past 40 to my knowledge, Phoebe. No more 40 than that outside. She's way too old for a boy like TK. TK ain't been no boy for some time. He's around 30, his own self. Don't care what it was. She could stop and say a few words with us. She act like we done something to her, Pearl Stone complained. She the one been doing wrong. You mean you mad 'cause she didn't stop and tell us all her business? Anyhow, what you ever know her to do so bad as y'all make out? The worst thing ever known her to do was talking a few years off her age, and that ain't nothing. Never harmed anybody. Y'all makes me tired. The what you talking? You would think the folks in this town didn't do nothing because praise the Lord. You have to excuse me 'cause I'm bound to go take her some supper. Phoebe stood up sharply. Don't mind us, little smile. Just go right ahead. Us don't mind you house for you till you get back. My supper is done. You better go see how she feel. You can let us know later. Lord, Pearl agreed. Done scorch up that little meat and bread too long to talk about. Can't stay away from home long as I see. My husband ain't fussing. Phoebe, if yours ready to go, could walk over to agree with you, Miss Sumpkins volunteered. It's sort of dusking down dark. Do Boogerman might catch her? Nah, I think y'all, nothing. Y'all couldn't catch me these few steps. I'm going. Anyhow, my husband tell me say no first class booger would help or have me. If she got anything to tell y'all hear it. Phoebe hurried on off with the covered bowl in her hands. She left the porch pelting her back unasked questions. They hoped the answers were cruel and strange. When she arrived at the place, Phoebe Watson didn't go in by the front gate and down the pond walk to the front door. She walked around the fence corner and went in the intimate gate with her heaping plate of Maluto rice. Janie must be round that side. She found her sitting on the steps of the back porch with the lamps all filled and the chimneys clean. Hello, Janie. How you coming? Pretty good. I'm trying to soak some of your tiredness and the dirt out of my feet. She laughed a little. See you is. God, you sure looks good. You looks like yours your own daughter. They both laughed. Even with them overalls on, you sure womanhood. Gone, girl, gone. You must think y'all bought y'all something. Well, I ain't brought home a thing but myself. That's a gracious plenty. Your friends wouldn't want nothing better. Takes that flattery off your Phoebe, because I know it's from the heart. Jamie extended her hand. Good Lord, Phoebe, ain't you nothing going to give me that little rations you brought me? I ain't had a thing on my stomach today except my hand. They both laugh easily. Give it here and have a seat. End scene. So that's going to conclude part 1 of this Their Eyes Were Watching God by Zora Neale Hurston. And it's a lot to kind of unpack there, but overall, it's the beginning of understanding, trying to fit in the world and understand the journey. And with that, you end up getting a lot of naysayers or all in your business, but you end up at least getting one that can connect and about the journey. Okay, just kind of connect with it, I guess I want to say. And so here we hear about phobia that we just learned about overall in the foreword. And in the beginning of the first chapter, phobia is death. It's like she's going to be throughout as we go through the novel. So I'm going to end it here. There's a lot to go through. And overall, I think that's the takeaway from this. And then I do a part 2, which I'm going to read some more of this and go from there. All right, I hope you enjoyed this. I did reading it. And thank you so much for supporting my podcast. And this week of the Power of Reading Week. All right, talk to y'all in the next one.